By.
Can we go enough this way? Is that sweet?
No,
You take it.
I thought you had one. I thought I saw one. You had one there.
I'd like to welcome everybody to the April 11th, 2023 meeting of the Johnson City Regional Planning Commission. If you're here to speak about one of the topics that we are here to discuss this evening, please wait until I open the public comment section of our meeting, and then I'll recognize you and you come forward to the microphone at the podium. Please state your name and address your comments, please, to us, and stay on topic, and you'll be given 3 minutes for conversation, and we appreciate any input you have to give us. I'll call the meeting to order now at 2 minutes after 6. Vice Mayor Murphy, would you please lead us in an invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, sir. Let us pray. Father, we thank you on today for the opportunity to come together to conduct the business and affairs of this great city. Lord, we pray that you will lead us and guide us in our decision-making process, and the results will be pleasing unto your sight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. All right, we have an agenda before us. Any changes or questions or additions to the agenda? I hear a movement that the agenda be accepted.
So moved.
Second. All right, having a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. We have the minutes from the March 14th meeting presented to all of us. We've reviewed them. Any changes or adjustments or corrections? Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve. I second.
All right, I've got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We've got a consent agenda with 2 items tonight. The first item is the Whitehead property final plat. And the second item is the Cardinal Forest Phase 3 final plat. Do we have any questions or conversations, or anybody want to bring those forward?
I move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, I've got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. So now we'll move on to our agenda. We have one preliminary plat of the Lakes Estates. Mr. Ryder, I think you're presenting that, please.
Yes, sir. Good evening. Good evening, Chairman Dagenhart, Vice Chairman Oceanbine, Commissioners. This is a county plat, and it's pretty straightforward, other than it's probably the trickiest plat that I ever had to process in my entire life, just because of some little nuances with the road dedication, but it being under our subdivision regulations, but the road dedication being dedicated to the county. There's a lot of moving pieces to this one, but should be a pretty straightforward presentation. This is the area that we're talking about. This is DeGrasse Drive, or DeGrasse Drive on the Bristol Highway. Shady Lane is another road up from that. This is a city road as it comes off of the Bristol Highway until it gets to about actually around this point or so. This is all county. Everything that you see shaded is county. There's no annexation. There's no intention to annex. It's a county development. Any future development of these 5 single-family lots will take place under county zoning regulations. This is just simply a plat that falls under our subdivision regulations. All right, the plat, it's a 5-lot subdivision plan for single-family development. It's zoned A1 in the county. Public water is available. Public sewer is not available. However, the lots are or 5 acres or greater, and they're all 5 acres. If they're 5 acres or greater than 5 acres or greater than 5 acres or equal to 5 acres, then they don't need the TDEC stamp approval at this point. So everything's fine there. And then this extension of the existing Shady Lane will be dedicated to the county. There's a variance request, a couple of them associated with the 64-foot right-of-way for the rural cross-section. So this is the appropriate cross-section because the lots are, this cross-section can be used for lots that are a minimum of 2 acres. Obviously, these are greater than 2 acres and have a lot width of 200 feet, at least a minimum of 200 feet. These are greater than 200 feet. First step was to make sure that the county road superintendent, Doug Jones, was agreeable to the dedication. And really, since the maintenance of the road was going to be taken over by the county, we wanted to defer to them in a lot of ways of what they would be willing to maintain. The county has no sidewalk requirement for new development. They don't maintain sidewalks. The good thing about this cross-section is the sidewalks are optional, and with 5 large lots, not expected to produce a lot of pedestrian traffic, they're simply not needed. We do not believe that they're needed here. There are a couple right-of-way. This cross-section here, it starts out to better match the existing shady lane. We started out with a reduction, with a request to reduce the cross-section right-of-way width from 64 feet to 40 feet to tie in better with the existing shady lane cross-section. And as it gets back to this point, then it widens to a 50-foot right-of-way. 50 feet right-of-way on this development, on this road, is more than sufficient width. The pavement width reduction of 25 to 22, again, agreeable by the Washington County Road Superintendent, is more than adequate for the vehicular traffic expected here. And reducing the shoulder width from 7.5 feet to 5 feet, 5 feet is also something that the city engineer and the county road superintendent and myself believe was sufficient here. If you think about some of the issues that we've had in other parts of the city where we have congestion with people parking on the sides of the road and this and that and the other, these lots are going to be massive lots. There should be no parking on shoulders or anything else. This is sufficient road cross-section for if a car breaks down and needs to pull over or whatever the case is. We believe this is good. This is what the county has agreed to accept. So therefore, this is what we're proposing. Our recommendation is to approve the final plat and approve the variance requests as depicted in the street cross sections. And I will note too that this cul-de-sac here does meet our fire requirements of 96 feet of pavement, though it would also be county responding to these fires if there was one. Hopefully there's not. The other thing that I would note, probably more for the applicant than anything else, is because we're using the rural profile, it is not a possibility to further subdivide these properties into smaller lots in the future. That's a requirement in the subdivision regulations. I'll go back to the recommendation screen. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder. Questions for staff?
Other than financial, what was the reason for requesting the variance on the road?
We don't believe that one, it's what the county was agreeable to maintaining. Their cross-section, their rural cross-section is a little bit different than ours. This aligns more with what theirs is. I haven't posted theirs because I didn't really think it made much of a difference to show what theirs was for the purpose of this meeting. But there will be, obviously, there'll be less cost for the developer in building this road, but the fact that this road is going to tie into nothing in the future and there's no expected further development other than these 5 lots, we felt that this was just a better fit than requiring a larger cross-section.
And there's no real concern about the development on the other side of the road, future development? No, you were in the right place, Will.
Okay, well, I was trying to look at the other side of the
Oh,
road.
okay.
It would actually be over here.
Right, yeah, north on the plan.
Well, I'm crossed up here in 1 second. You're talking about over here.
Yes.
It could possibly develop, but I don't see where that would have much of an impact on this road
So the
here.
county would still be comfortable with this construction if that would develop?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Ryder, the applicant has no concerns regarding future subdivision if we use this road section?
You're
not planning on
providing any future subdivision of these lots? Yeah, I mean, his intent has been to create 5 large estate lots for 5 houses.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that going to be recorded that they can't be further subdivided?
It will be a condition of our I mean, it's in our subdivision regulations, so it won't be, it likely will not be placed on the plat, but that could change if the subdivision regulations change.
It will be a requirement for restrictions. Maybe single-family homes on this.
The deed restrictions?
Yes.
All right, any other questions for staff? All right, I'm going to open the floor for public comment. Thank you very much,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ryder. Open the floor for public comment. Anyone here to speak to or to the question? If there are, please raise your hand and come forward. Seeing none, I'll close the floor for public comment. All right, questions amongst us?
Sounds like everybody's happy.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Will, could you go back to your slide with the recommendation, please?
With the variance, okay.
Yeah, approve with the variance.
I'll retract that. I'll make a motion to approve with the variance.
And I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion to approve the subdivision preliminary plat with a variance to the road construction profile. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And I hear a second. from
Second.
Dr. All right, we've got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, please call the roll.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Bailey,
Yes.
Commissioner Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Lockmiller. Yes. Commissioner Rhodey,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitfield,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Oceanbine.
Yes.
Chairman Dagenhart.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you very much. So we have one more item on our agenda. That is a discussion item, a presentation of some work that we've done in committee on overlays, and Ms. Amber Rogers is going to be presenting for staff.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I like the keyboard. Okay, so let's go. So we have 5 overlay, oh, there it goes, 5 overlay districts. We had been concentrating on one of them, the design overlay district, because that's the one that is the most restrictive, and it has the most details in it, and it's the biggest problem that we've heard from developers about. And while I started working on that, I started looking at the other overlays, and I found that there's corollary things that we could update in those as well. So I thought that it would be a great idea just to wipe them all out right now, because they're all very similar, the changes. So of the 5 overlay districts, one of them is fine, it doesn't need any changes, and I give it to you in full in your packets. There aren't any facade requirements or things like this as in these other overlays. So that one doesn't need anything. Like I said, design overlay needs the most, and then the second most is gateway, and the least is corridor in this set. And then, it wasn't in your packet, but I started looking at the Highway Vista overlay, and I realized that there's a problem with it, and we don't have to figure it out today, but I want to plant the seed in your minds that we need to think about what to do with it. So the changes are to bring the text into compliance with state law, to provide some relief from the very strict material requirements. We want to add an exemption provision to allow somebody to not have to do it if you can't see the project from the road. We want the text to be consistent and accurate, more user-friendly, and we want to close a loophole. So just definition changes in state law, we have to make updates to our code, really simple things. And then this one, the state law changed to prohibit discrimination against certain construction techniques or materials. So we are taking out that really strong discriminatory language and adding in something that's non-discriminatory. Okay, and like I said, we're gonna focus on design overlay because it is the most. The current material requirements have a minimum of 75% natural clay brick or natural stone, the most expensive materials. Then it allows a maximum of 20% of some other things and a maximum of 5% of some other things. So the way that it worked out is we did a lot. So we're gonna reduce that minimum requirement from 75% to 67% to provide a little bit of relief. Add split face block, which is another durable material, and it's comparable to the other ones. And then for shorter buildings, we'll have alternate primary materials. And for taller buildings, another set of alternate primary materials. So just a real quick look at the added split face block. It's a durable material. It works similar to the other ones. It should be fine to improve aesthetics in the corridors. And the alternate primary materials for 1- and 2-story buildings are the semi-durable materials. And we would allow them on a maximum of 67%, rather than that minimum for the other ones, the durable materials. And it would also require a special inspection, because installation of these materials is the key to durability. And for the taller buildings, the 3 and higher stories, we would require the regular primary materials, that's clay brick, natural stone, split face block on the first floor. And then you could do up to 67% EFIS on the upper stories. And the reason is because EFIS is really susceptible to being damaged by just bumping. And this is a picture of a restaurant downtown. People probably just walked by and bumped into it, and it started unraveling. But if it's on upper floors, it'll be away from that sort of damage. So, and it's everybody likes how it looks. It's versatile. You can do all kinds of things with it. Okay. So secondary materials, again, we're increasing from 20% to 33%. Adding a couple of materials, architectural metal, those 10 gauge is a durable material. It's a lot thicker than regular metal siding that you'd see. And adding engineered wood and wood. And then the other changes just sort of clean up the other changes in other places. And that's what those things look like. And then we pretty much just upped tertiary materials 5%. This is just to allow more flexibility in what it is that can be proposed. Please don't read this. It's just to show an organizational style change. Whereas before, everything was just sort of tucked into a single paragraph. Because we have so many new categories and it was going to be cumbersome to try to figure out what to do, I tried to pull it out into individual paragraphs so it's easier to catch up with what it is that you're trying to propose and what's allowed. It should help staff and builders know how to use the code. Okay, so why we're here. We've talked about this a few times, but just as a reminder, cost. The 75% of the most expensive materials is cost prohibitive. And it could actually be making the intent of this not move forward. Because if people can't afford to do the development, then they're not going to. So the purpose is to encourage redevelopment and further the intent of the layer. It's not to take anything away, it's to add. And I just wanted to make the other point is that durability is really the key here, because aesthetics is a matter of taste. Everybody has a different idea of what is attractive or beautiful, and material-wise. So if we focus on durability and making that so that the buildings don't fall apart and look terrible, because everybody can agree that a falling apart building doesn't look attractive, then we can increase the visual interest and, again, further the intent. And then there was a couple other things that we're changing to all three. We're adding that exemption, and this is just some of the language in that. And the idea of it was, I wanted to say that we had a discussion at one of the meetings, and there was a question as to what height that visual representation should be from, and it should be from about where you'd be sitting in a car. So we added the viewpoint that you're looking at would be from 3 feet above grade of the road, and then towards the project site. And then this is just sort of the idea of it. If you can't see it, there's no reason to make a developer spend this money.
And that's at any point on the road?
So the way that the exemption, to show that you are exempt, the way that that says is you have to provide at least 3 vantage points, and staff will review them. And if we need more, we'll give them more to give us. We'll say, oh, we need one from here and here and here too. So it has to be something that is actually going to show us that it should be exempt. Yeah, so it's not from a single location, it's from a number of vantage points that you would be driving down the road and be able to see the project site. And then Highway Vista. In 1996, this was adopted as 6.29 in our zoning code, and no map was adopted with it. There was no zoning map amendment associated with it. So this is a district that is not applied anywhere in the city. So we can either think about where we want to apply it, do we think it belongs somewhere, or we can think about scrapping it.
Do we know where it was originally intended to apply?
I have no idea.
Oh.
I looked through all the old minute books, I looked through the old ordinance books. I could not find anything. So, but like I said, we don't have to do that today. I just wanted to plant that seed in your mind that it's something that we should probably fix, because it doesn't make sense right now. And then my goals. So I want us to have a discussion, questions. We asked our CBO to stay to talk about materials if we need any questions that I cannot answer. I told you everything I know in your packets. I did my best on that, but if you still have any questions, and I think we have Ben here too, he can help us if he doesn't mind. I want to hear what you have to say about what's been done so far, if you have any ideas, you want anything changed. And then I'd also like to know if you think that this is ready to be heard for a recommendation at the May meeting.
I suspect that Highway Vista overlay may have been intended for, I believe it was 181 at the time, later I-26, but there's really nothing that we've been able to find.
No, the
on
ordinance
that.
is completely unrevealing.
I've heard tell of that sort of, I don't know if it's urban legend or what the case is.
Is it
on that, but I
more like
suspect
any of the
it
other overlays?
I think I provided it in your, I didn't read through it because, like I said, I wasn't really making changes to that one. But I recognized that it seemed real weird. Highway Vista. Here it is. Yeah, it has the development standards, utilities, mechanical equipment, building facades. It has quite a few of the things.
Very similar to the corridor overlay, which is one of the least restrictive ones.
Yeah. But I don't think that this one would need changes that are corollary to these other changes. I don't see anything in here that would warrant those other changes.
All right, questions for staff?
Yeah, I have a question, Chairperson Dagenhart. My question is, with respect to primary materials, how did you arrive to going with a minimum of 67%? Why such that odd number? I mean, it's a very specific number, and I just wanted to know how you arrived to that number.
We went to 2/3 and 1/3 instead of 3/4 and 1/4. So it was just a fractional increase that is, it's pretty significant because it's a good portion, but we didn't want to make too many drastic changes. So if we find that we need to make more changes later, like if we need to loosen it up even more, I just didn't want to loosen it up excessively because we're making so many changes and allowing so many new materials. So it was really just looking at fractions of things, and it went 3/4 to 2/3.
Ms. Rogers, when you mentioned about the EFIS installation would require a special inspection, can you tell me who would perform that? Would that be on the onus would be on the city, or who would perform that inspection?
A developer would be required to hire an independent special inspector. And just to be clear, I didn't put that in our zoning code, special inspection for EFIS. That's actually already in the building code, I believe.
Would this inspector be certified? What will qualify as an appropriate inspector?
All of that stuff is laid out in those documents. Let me tell you what they're called. Again, I'm not the expert of this by any means, but wait, let me see where it is. Let me get to the design overlay changes. Let's see. International Building Code and Tennessee Structural Engineers Association. Those are the two. It would have to comply with those guidelines.
Okay, so there's a standard that you'd be
Yes.
inspecting to?
Yeah,
not-
yeah, it's nothing that we made up. It's a thing that exists,
Okay.
and we're using it.
That's helpful. Thank you very much.
Amber, I got a question. What vehicle do you have or procedure as new materials become available to change the aspects of the material?
Well, we have what we're doing right now,
Okay.
first. And second of all, in the secondary materials, that one already has a clause that says, "and/or other materials as approved by the Development Services Director or his designee." So for secondary materials, we already have that very open, but for primary materials, we would have to do a text change,
Okay.
like we're doing right now.
Who, other than the director for planning, I'm assuming, who else has authority to do that?
Whoever he designates,
Uh-huh.
so CBO.
Okay.
Ms. Rogers, when was there an update to this last?
Oof. I don't know that it's been updated since it was installed.
Okay,
Are you, I don't know that it's ever been updated.
gotcha. So, just in summary, this is an update to the materials, also catch up with technology to lower the burden of builds within the community to ease development on these corridors, basically.
Yeah, and if we can encourage redevelopment of the corridors, then we're furthering the intent of the district.
Mhm. Is there any downsides to bringing this to bear now that y'all can see as staff?
No. No, I mean, I think we did a lot of research, and it seems like a great idea. And if it turns out that it needs more changes, then we do what we're doing now.
Excellent. Thank you.
I have a question about the corrugated metal. And it was basically, if I remember it correctly, that corrugated metal is not allowed, but a certain type of metal, it was like a 10 gauge or something like that.
Yes, so
Could I
you
get
can have.
clarification between those two products?
Okay, so first of all, architectural metal and powder-coated metal would be at least 10 gauge. That's very thick. Corrugated metal is like, what, 20? It's
So-
like 20 gauge, so it's pretty thin.
So it's like a
22.
roofing metal kind of thing, or even,
10 gauge would be more than.
okay. I guess where I'm going is it's the corrugated part that I'm kind of getting stuck on, because there's a lot of really modern architecture that involves a metal that mimics that old school corrugated roofing material, and it's used in a really, really modern way. And I don't want to eliminate people from being able to utilize that shape just because of the shape. Does that make sense?
Has nothing to do with the shape.
Okay.
It's all about the construction.
Okay.
But you may find that what you're talking about may not be available in that
Right.
Yeah,
that
it was-
aesthetic product.
It would have to be the durable 10
Right.
gauge metal.
Oh, everything's available if you have the money.
Well,
But that's the
okay,
thing.
and we're back to the
But no,
cost.
I'm just going with the design thing. I don't want something just because of a shape to not be allowed.
Yeah, this is talking about just the generic corrugated or galvanized metal siding that's super dentable.
Okay. Right, that when you
Yeah.
buy it at Lowe's, it already has dents.
Yeah, but if
in
their
it.
metal was powder coated, architectural, 10 gauge,
Okay.
this would be fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers.
Oh, wait, one
Oh,
more question.
you had
Sorry, I
one
have one more
question.
question
I
about metal,
apologize.
sorry. Would something, so even on a second story where it can't be dented, it would still need to be
They can have up to 33% of the architectural metal. You cannot have any of the corrugated, the thin metals
Ever.
that you can see from the roadway.
okay.
Any other questions or comments for staff? Clarifications? All right, I'm going to open the floor for public comment. We've spent several hours of workshop time, and Amber's spent an inordinate amount of time, staff time, researching and collecting and bringing forward ideas, but we want to hear from the public. If you have some thoughts about this change that's going to be coming sometime in the future, please come forward and speak to it. State your name and address at the podium.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Ben Dutton, 7 Cox Farm Court, Johnson City, Tennessee. Having been a part of the process with respect to looking at the overlay, I just wanted to thank both the Commission and the staff as well. There has been a lot of work and consideration that has gone into it. And I think from a developer's perspective, where we've ended up is we're ending up with something that's a lot more up to date. It's a lot more applicable. It's a lot friendlier than the overlay that was in place before, and significantly just reducing the applicability of the primary materials for taller buildings from really being the whole thing down to the first floor, which makes a whole bunch of sense. That will have a significant. I mean, that's really where I think a lot of the relief comes in. The only comment or thought I have for you, for your contemplation, is really with respect to the applicability of the overlay. Currently, the overlay applies to a parcel if that parcel is within 300 feet of the road. Now, in some lots, of course, you can have a flag lot configuration, for example, where it is just there's a narrow piece of the property that comes down, and because that narrow piece of the property might clip that 300 feet, even if the building is set back, say, 400 or 500 feet, that building would still have to comply with the overlay. So the only other item to consider really as you're looking at this, maybe that applicability is just to clarify that rather than it being the parcel, perhaps that applicability should pertain to the building within a certain setback. But that's really the only other thought. So thank you very much for your time, and again, thank you very much to staff and the Commission for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton. Any other questions or comments or from the floor, from the public? I'll close public comment. Amber, I think I could tell by the look on your face you had something else to add.
To what Mr. Dutton just said, I would say that they have the opportunity to show that the building would not be visible from the road with the exemption provision.
But it could be visible 500 feet away.
It could.
Is where Ben's coming from, right?
It could.
Is that not the classic philosophy behind the overlay is the visual? And we've just set 300 feet as a.
Because we
We've got to
needed.
pick something,
We
right?
needed something, and so the intent of the overlay is to improve the aesthetics of the corridor over time. And not that that's the plan, but to put in a building that's 10 stories high and made of shiny galvanized metal, that doesn't further the intent. So there's the opportunity to show that you're exempt as well.
Is the exemption only available for naturally occurring situations? So building a house on so you have a flag lot and you want to build something back behind it and there's a 3-story row of apartments in front of it that are blocking the view, that would not be eligible for an exemption?
It would not.
Ms. Rogers, I think I would be in error if I didn't mention this. So Commissioner Pavlich several times mentioned his concern about the overlays. I think I may have mentioned this to you before, of what happens if a new lot is brought into the area or is rezoned, and it's, say it's proximal to an overlay district. Would it not also fall into the same parameters as the overlay? Would the overlay kind of extend to it? I think you looked into this and you said there was very few lots that would be applicable to. Is that correct?
I'm not 100% sure I understand what your question was. Are you talking about the way that the right-of-way sort of fluctuates in some places, and so the district pops out?
You know,
I believe he's referring to the possibility of the overlay actually being expanded because an adjacent piece of property changes its classification and its use.
If I remember that, when I was at that meeting that one day, I believe the discussion was, sorry, Ann, the discussion was, you have the overlay as depicted on the map, it touches certain properties. And the next property over may not be in the overlay. And I think Commissioner Pavlich said that it would be nice to be able to make those comply with the overlay, even if it's not touched by the board.
Right.
My thoughts on that is it's got to stop somewhere. So I think that it's either in the overlay or it's not, and it seems like it would be a very heavy-handed regulation, I believe, to say that just because you can see this lot from an overlay, but if the overlay doesn't actually encroach on that property, then why would we want to include it in the
I think-
overlay?
I don't think we're connecting up on this idea yet.
Yeah, I think the original example was University Parkway, right, where it comes into South Road. The Dollar General just got rezoned. I forgot what it was before. It was R4 residential. Now it's commercial. Overlay stops kind of right there at South Road, and it was an excellent question. It was like, should that overlay not extend across South Road to take in this new piece of residential or retail property that's now coming into the area?
We would have to amend the zoning map to enlarge the overlay.
Okay. So you couldn't just put it in a cap. I guess my question is, since we're rewriting this now, would this be appropriate time to address that question? It sounds like it's not, because you have to re-amend the map.
I think that if you were to hear a rezoning application in a place where you think that the district should extend, that could be part of your recommendation for the map change.
Okay, that's the answer. If at the terminus of a overlay district, if something is added at the end of the overlay district and we feel like it should be considered as part of the overlay district, we could consider that at the change of the property status.
Yeah, I think that would be the time to, because to try to do it parcel by parcel at this point would be
Sure.
way beyond what we could
Burdensome.
handle.
That's a great answer, thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Let
Rogers.
me make sure I understand what y'all are saying. So that's all right. We're at the very end of the
Of an
overlay,
at the end
standing
where
at the red
it
light.
ends.
And,
Or
but we can see that Dollar General that's technically past the red light.
Yes.
And prior, it
Does
was
the overlay
residential.
make that distinction right now?
It does.
It
Stops at
it
the
stops.
street.
There's a very specific amount of
So
property
the
that
300,
applies.
the 300 doesn't become a half circle at the end of the overlay?
No, it stops at the border of the street.
All right. Okay, thanks.
And it stopped there because everything past that was residential, but now it's becoming retail. But I like that solution that now comes before us. We can just,
Deal with it with the property change, status change.
I'm satisfied with that. Thank you.
That's kind of, isn't that kind of capricious? I mean, what's the developer gonna, he's gonna come to us with a proposal when he doesn't think the overlay's in effect, and then we're gonna throw that out on the table? Is that,
I think that shouldn't come as a surprise. I would expect staff might mention to them that there's a consideration that the overlay stops at your property, and would you prefer that it be extended or not extended? But that'll be a consideration for us to make when we change the status of the property.
I personally think that, and I could talk with the staff attorney about this, but I really think that if you start getting into, properties are what they are. They're either in the overlay or they're not in the overlay. If we have requests to rezone the property, is it possible to extend the overlay? Maybe, It sounds like that's starting to get into a little bit of contractual zoning, is we're going to do this to you. If you want your property, then you're gonna have to agree to complying with an overlay. It's not saying that it's off the board, it's not something that it couldn't be entertained. Maybe it shouldn't be entertained, maybe it's impossible to entertain it if it's not legally correct. We'd have to make sure that it's legal and talk with our legal department, but I would be very, very hesitant to start looking at extending overlays. I would, when you do this, if you want to look at the overlays, and you think they should be extended, then I would think that perhaps you should think about amending the zoning map to include all those areas that should be in the overlay, the future development.
think
But
that would-
I don't know that I would do it case by case.
That will be a topic that will be considered in our comprehensive growth plan. work.
The other thing is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there's two overlay, the corridor overlay covers most all of Roan Street. It stops at a certain point on South Roan Street. That property you're speaking of is at the corner of University Parkway and South Roan, and then the UPO, the University Parkway overlay, starts up a little further west from that intersection, and that overlay actually has very little to do with facade standards anyways. So, but anyways, I would look at it addressing those. If you think overlays should be extended, look at it in the growth management plan and maybe amending them this way instead of looking at it in case-by-case rezonings.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I know that doesn't have a whole lot of what Ms. Rogers is presenting, but it is a good point. If you have a piece of property that zones in to the same zone that has the overlay requirements, and it's literally across the street, you would think they should then also have to build to the same standard if the city is growing. But I can see where you can't be that dynamic and changing it that quickly, but it does bring up a good point about that. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
All right, any other discussion?
And Chairman, just a point of clarification, we're not voting on this tonight, correct?
No, this
We're
is not up
just,
for a vote. I think what's going to happen is we will consult with staff and see how much additional changings or analysis this needs. I think one point of question was the overlay that you found that's never had an application assigned to it. So maybe you and I can talk about that offline and make a choice of how to discuss that, whether to discuss that virtually with the commission or whether to bring it back directly next month. But I would think that at this point, we're probably ready to bring this back next month.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if the commissioners that are here, do y'all feel like we need a workshop on this topic? Or do you feel like, based on Mr. Rogers' presentation, y'all are comfortable voting on this at the next meeting?
I'd like to still have a workshop on it, frankly. I think when you're talking about aesthetics as an architect, I'm not sure that everybody is on the same page in terms of what's pretty or not pretty. It's a very subjective situation. And sometimes with regulations that deal with aesthetics, you're subject to lawsuits because they are somebody's opinion that aren't necessarily routed in fact. So I'd like to have a workshop and discuss that aspect a little bit more.
Anyone else's thoughts on a workshop, or how to proceed?
I agree with the workshop.
Okay. Staff will talk about putting a workshop on the calendar on this topic. Please. All right, any other business to come before us this evening? Hearing none, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.